the day that transformed Henry VIII. On the 24th of January 1536, an event unfolded that would profoundly alter the trajectory of King Henry VIII's reign, reshaping not only his character, but also the future of England itself. This day marked a significant turning point for a monarch already known for his larger-than-life persona and turbulent rule. The backdrop of this pivotal moment was steeped in personal triumphs and tragedies, and earlier in January, Henry had celebrated the death of his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, which brought to a close a tumultuous decade marked by legal battles and personal strife over the validity of their marriage. With Catherine's passing, Henry felt liberated, viewing it as an opportunity to mend strange relations with her nephew, Emperor Charles V. As he spoke with an ambassador, he exuded confidence that diplomatic ties would be restored. Meanwhile, Henry's second wife, Anne Boleyn, was pregnant again, and Henry held great hope that this child would be the male heir that he so desperately sought. The entire month of January became a series of celebrations for the king. Court festivities included lavish feasts, elaborate dances, and a sense of jubilation in the air. It was during this season of merriment that Henry, eager to showcase his enduring athletic prowess, decided to enter a jousting tournament himself. At over 40 years old and significantly heavier than he had been in his youth, his decision raised eyebrows among his courtiers. They likely urged him against it, aware that his age and weight could compromise his performance. However, Henry's pride was at stake. The recent birth of another daughter to Anne only heightened his determination to demonstrate that he was still a formidable figure on the field. Dressed in gleaming armour that accentuated his royal stature, including a pronounced codpiece meant to symbolise virility, Henry made a grand entrance onto the tournament field. His horse, equally resplendent in armour, added to the spectacle. The crowd, full of nobles and commoners alike, erupted in cheers as the king took his place, a mixture of admiration and anxiety hanging in the air. Anne Boleyn was not in attendance, which may have motivated Henry to dedicate his performance to another lady, potentially Jane Seymour, who had become a point of intrigue at court. The identity of Henry's opponent remains lost to history, but whoever faced the king that day would soon be horrified by the unfolding disaster. As the two knights charged at each other, the clash of lances resonated through the arena. Henry's lance shattered upon impact, sending him crashing to the ground. The heavy armour of his horse then collapsed atop of him, and the scene quickly devolved into chaos as spectators gasped in shock. Rushed to the palace, Henry lay unresponsive, prompting immediate concern from his courtiers. Medical examinations revealed that a splinter from the lance had pierced his leg, but far more troubling was the realization that he had suffered serious internal injuries, ones that the medical knowledge of the time could not adequately address. For several hours Henry remained unconscious, and as the minutes turned into hours, anxiety permeated the court. Advisers debated how to navigate a future without their king. Would they support his daughters, Elizabeth and Mary, as potential successors, or would factions emerge to vie for power in the wake of a kingless England? When Henry finally regained consciousness, he was irrevocably changed, and historians have posited that this jousting accident marks a profound transformation in his personality. The king, who once embodied the spirit of a vibrant and generous ruler, now grappled with feelings of paranoia and suspicion. This incident catalyzed a shift from a youthful, charismatic monarch into a cruel and unpredictable tyrant. As Worsley notes, the king's demeanour became increasingly erratic. The nature of his rule began to change markedly, and whispers of his tyranny spread throughout the reign. The physical ramifications of the accident were severe. Henry's temper became volatile, with outbursts of anger that were once rare. He suffered from debilitating headaches and dealt with the constant pain from his leg injury, which never healed properly. At times the wound would close only to reopen, producing foul-smelling pus that served as a constant reminder of his vulnerability. The once active king found himself unable to engage in the physical pursuits that had defined his earlier years, leading to further weight gain and exacerbating his condition. The accident forced Henry to confront uncomfortable truths about his life. He could no longer ignore the reality that he was aging and no longer the agile prince who had once been able to bounce back from injury. His marital life faced complications as well. The gossip that surrounded him intensified, particularly following tactless comment made by George Boleyn during his trial, which hinted at Henry's difficulties in the bedroom. Despite 2 marriages and numerous pregnancies, at least 10 between both wives, Henry was still without a male heir. Elizabeth and Mary, his 2 daughters, remained vulnerable to challenges regarding their legitimacy, especially with factions within the kingdom eager for power. The aftermath of the jousting accident reverberated through Henry's life. Just days later, Anne Boleyn suffered a miscarriage, losing what was believed to be a male fetus. This heartbreaking event set in motion a swift and brutal downfall for Anne, culminating in her execution only months later. Henry, now fully aware that he would stop at nothing to achieve his desires, displayed an increasingly ruthless demeanour. By 1540, contemporary observers like Charles de Marillac noted the changes in Henry's character with growing concern. He was perceived as a ruler consumed by avarice, deeply mistrustful of those around him. De Marillac articulated a grim assessment, stating that Henry's insatiable greed had led him to plunder the wealth of the church, thereby impoverishing his people. This greed birthed a second plague, profound distrust. The king, aware of the many upheavals and scandals that he had instigated, became convinced that no one could be trusted. He resorted to violence and bloodshed to maintain control, reflecting a ruler who would stop at nothing to secure his position. Lastly, de Marillac pointed out Henry's fickleness and inconsistency, which led to profound shifts in the legal and moral landscape of his reign. The transformation of Henry VIII was stark. The vibrant, promising young king, described as generous and noble, became a shadow of his former self, shrouded in paranoia and brutality. Historians have pointed out that Henry's perception of treason shifted dramatically post-accident. It became synonymous not with the threats against the crown, but with any perceived slight or failure to conform to his wishes. In the court of Henry VIII, the atmosphere shifted to one of trepidation and manipulation. His musicians and courtiers, including the court jester Will Somers, took on the role of entertainers, tasked with diverting the king's attention from his growing malaise and temper. Somers, renowned for his cleverness, occasionally succeeded in eliciting laughter from Henry, offering a brief respite from the tension. However, even the king's fall was not immune to the wrath of the increasingly volatile monarch. There were instances where Henry resorted to physical violence against Somers, who would later recount the event humorously, but the underlying fear remained palpable. Those in the king's orbit learned to tread carefully, knowing that a single misstep could provoke his ire. Thus, the jousting accident of the 24th of January 1536 stands as a pivotal moment, not just in the life of Henry VIII, but also in the broader narrative of English history. The consequences of that fateful day cascaded through the remainder of his reign, leaving an undeniable mark on the monarchy and its legacy. Henry's evolution from a charismatic prince to a tyrannical king encapsulated the tensions of the era and set the stage for future conflicts, ultimately shaping the course of England for generations to come.